Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone. I am your host, Jen Sherman, and we have two very special guests on today, as all our guests are special. We have Winston Lord. He's a storyteller and ambassador, founder of Lord Hospitality, and also the former chief evangelist at OpenTable. We also have another foodie and corporate executive, Anastasia Dellaccio. She is the senior manager of community impact and philanthropy, corporate affairs at Booz Allen Hamilton, and also in the hospitality restaurant industry. So welcome, and I'm already craving gelato. Welcome, Anastasia and Winston. How are you?
Great.
Great. Thanks for having us today.
Of course. Thanks so much for being here. We always like to start the show with a quote. An estimated 2.5 million restaurant jobs were lost nationwide in 2020, according to National Restaurant Association. From an article in the New York Magazine written by Chris Crowley, in an industry where healthcare is more often the exception than the rule, affordable therapy is rarely accessible for employees, and the continuing compounding stresses of working during the COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated existing problems. I think, starting off with something like this, and, I know, Winston, in our prior conversations regarding some of the work you've done within the hospitality industry during these times, and, Anastasia opening up with some of the, challenges that you've faced throughout this pandemic. I would love to kind of get your thoughts on that quote before hopping into the interview.
Sure. I'm happy to jump in. I don't even know where to start. I feel like it's really been an evolution of problems. And, from the beginning, for us, we have a gelato company, Dolce Gelati. And the beginning of the pandemic marked the beginning of our season. As soon as those cherry blossoms start to bloom, we hit the ground running and start scooping. And so kind of having to shut down. We're at the zoo, we're at the National Stadium, coordinating with our partners, seeing what that will look like. And then, of course, staff and safety really coming first. And, just saying, you know what, everyone stay home for 3 weeks. We will pay you and we'll make it work. But really just learning to navigate the entire thing from, opening up. When we did open up, we had to build a to-go window. And luckily, I own the business with my husband. He's quite handy. And so, he installed the glass. He did all of this himself. He had to totally re-outfit the store. But then you have other things, ranging from, we weren't an online first company. Our website was incredibly old and chunky, but now is not the time to invest thousands of dollars into a refresh. You have a situation where you want to take care of all of your employees, but, and luckily for PPP and some of the other loans, really being able to hold on to them, but also knowing like they make a lot of their money on their overtime. And like, we've had to really cut that. And then we did lose some staff and have found it really, really hard to hire staff back. Quite frankly, people who were hourly, who decided to leave because they realized that the overtime pay sort of outweighs the benefit of going back to work and putting yourself at risk. So, it's been a full year of learning and adaptation and resilience. We're excited to be kind of coming back in full force. And I would say, kind of closing the loop, one of the real opportunities that has come out of all of this is the partnership and the camaraderie between those in the industry. Last year we were partnering with Hellbender Beer to do outdoor beer garden and gelato, and they were hosting it at their factory, which is just a couple doors down from ours. So we had a whole lot of great serendipitous partnerships. Now we're super excited to be opening up a location at the Bowie Monger in Friendship Heights in Washington, D.C., based upon the fact they have all this square space, they're paying rent. And, this way we can kind of cost share the rent and have our branding there, and it's mutually beneficial. So it's been a real learning process, but I think, the industry has really kind of stayed close and been resilient, and it has been a bit of survival of the fittest, but hopefully we're going to see more and more doors reopening.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's
How
great.
about you, Winston?
Yeah, Anastasia.
What is your take on that?
Yeah, no, first of all, thanks for having me on here. And I want to give a quick shout out to Pamela Sorensen, who's all of our mutual friends that connected us. So hi, Pamela. I'm sure you're listening. But anyway, it's operators like Anastasia who talk about what they went through this past year that really inspires me. As my role as chief evangelist at OpenTable, what my primary responsibility was to listen to operators and to understand what they were going through, even before the pandemic. And mental health was a huge issue in the industry. It was sort of the hidden sort of thing that no one really wanted to talk about. Even the word mental health made it sound like it was a stigma. But in hospitality, that's always been there. There's always been the pressure to work extra hours, burned out, all this kind of stuff. But the pandemic brought all that forward and increased it, tenfold. And I'm sure Anastasia can tell you some examples, but it could be, diner behavior, having diners come in and the GM or the server is worried about, are they going to bring something home to their family? That's a stress. There's a stress of state regulations. One day you have to lay off your employees, then you bring them back, then you have to furlough them again, then you have to bring them back and fire them, all that stuff, all the pressure that goes with that. I think there's also the fact that, a lot of these operations went from probably, a fraction of the employees that were working. And so you've got people working 5 or 6 different roles at the restaurant. And so to me, what was really, amazing about this community is exactly what Anastasia said. Everyone came into this in it together and worked with each other to get through this. And I saw that through some of the things that I was doing at OpenTable. My role was to go out typically and visit operators and listen to them. But obviously I couldn't travel during the pandemic. So I had to reinvent my role. And what I did was create an online community of operators. At its peak, it reached over 500 operators from around the world that were sharing thoughts and ideas, not only online through a forum, but I thought what resonated the most were these series of roundtables focused on mental health. And these weren't didactic, bring a mental health expert in to talk to these operators. It was allowing these operators to share their journeys amongst themselves, creating a safe space. Everyone knew that everyone else was going through something, but to hear it from someone personal, I think just was a very cathartic experience for these operators. And so I think the one good thing about the pandemic, I think for the hospitality industry is that mental health is no longer a stigma. And I'm really excited and hopeful that people will recognize that and take the right steps, whether you're in hospitality or whether you're any corporation in the world.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And thank you, Winston and Anastasia, for just jumping right in and getting to the meat of some of the really important topics, and also just evolution. And I like to use the word evolution because I'm an optimist of the hospitality industry during this time, because I think we really, truly did have to come together, and as well as kind of address the mental health challenges that might be within the hospitality industry, where we just kept on moving and grooving all the time. And it was probably a wear and tear. And this way, we were, and to your point, Winston, like having these conversations and roundtables around things that perhaps there wasn't a space to actually have being vulnerable. So thank you for sharing that. And considering your role within the hospitality industry, how have you witnessed the impacts of mental health and the pandemic unfold? I know we kind of touched on that a little bit, but just in regards to, of course, we've had to, be attentive to employees and understand kind of the stresses around that. But did anything pop out to you specifically around mental health, and kind of like, how did you address that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, I had a startup prior to working at OpenTable that was acquired actually by Booking Holdings, the parent company for OpenTable. And what I tried to do was bring a lot of the practices we had at Venga, the startup, to OpenTable and to these operators, and sharing, again, through these roundtables. I don't think I was inventing anything new, necessarily, but it's just allowing others to talk about how they dealt with mental health. And oftentimes it can be very simple things. Checking in on someone, just saying, "Hey, how you doing today?" That I think is probably one of the most important things a leader can do for an organization, for their employees, just to check in, to see how they're doing. It could be making sure that the work-life balance is there. The hospitality industry is notorious for long hours and long shifts. I think coming out of this, I'm hearing a lot of operators recognize that's not necessarily the best model moving forward here. That we need to understand, especially during the pandemic, that people are individuals. They're just like you and I and Anastasia and everyone listening. Everyone's got other things going on besides work. Now, obviously, we want them focused on work and all that, but that means making sure that that work-life balance is there, so they're not bringing stuff from home to work, and vice versa. Allowing them the opportunity to, we saw many times, trying to find childcare and covering a shift. I found so many operators so inspiring to say, "That's all right, we got you covered. Stay home with your kids. That's more important." And I think just that realization, I think a lot of operators are already doing that, but I think if we can get the industry as a whole to recognize that there needs to be work-life balance, that's going to help with the mental health moving forward.
Definitely. I would definitely agree with that. Anastasia, did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I will say, beyond just the mental health and supporting employees on that aspect, it's really gone beyond. We have a lot of Spanish language first speakers that work for us, and just making sure that they understand and are in the loop about, changes within CDC regulations and how they need to be safe at home, or helping them navigate the vaccine distribution process. So things like that have also been really important to us. And then, I would also say, this is kind of, we don't have a lot of servers and things like that in our gelato shops, in our factory. But just other influences that I've had and I've been hearing through others in the industry, which can really be taking a toll on mental health beyond the late hours, is as things have started to slowly roll out and reopen, they have experienced just a complete and utter lack of respect from patrons coming back. And maybe it's just people have been stuck at home and they're just dying to be served. But everyone that I've talked to in the service industry just says it's become a really, really brutal atmosphere, from even when people are ordering at home, like the constant critic and being under pressure, but, really just people having a complete utter disregard for those in the service industry and treating people like they're their slaves working at their table, wondering, where's my water? Where's my this? And so I think that in itself is, the whole ebb and flow, like, for all of us not knowing what we can plan for, because who knows what's gonna, what new strain is gonna come across our town, next week. But, even the fact that once things do start to open up, these people are making at least 75% less than they were before, given capacity standards. But at the same time, what they're dealing with in terms of just people's utter disrespect is quadrupled. Another issue I just want to just throw out there anyway, and maybe we can talk about it a little later, but I do think it's related, are how many people have been forced out of the industry. In particular, women, and in particular, women of color and diverse backgrounds who have exponentially lost jobs or have had to give up their jobs due to childcare, and understanding that, the cost of paying somebody to watch your kids who are home every single day learning way outweighs anything that they're making in the industry. And it's a critical mental health issue. It's a getting people back to work issue. And it's something I think we're only starting to see the beginning cracks of repercussions of this appear.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, Anastasia, it's interesting. We just had an earlier. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Winston.
Fine. No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just to echo off the point of the women aspect, we were I was just talking to earlier today another guest for the show of how it's been a really big challenge around that too, and just now we're really seeing a lot of the data come out from the past year. So how can we continue to kind of combat that challenge?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that's a point that needs to be said and repeated over and over and over again. I think there's the combination of losing people in the hospitality workforce, right? We're losing the people who are, or maybe the second job, and deciding to enter a new career. And so what you're having, the people staying are people who are passionate about hospitality. And you need to recognize that both as a diner and treat them as such, but also as an employer and as a leader. You need to recognize, I don't have to tell any business owner here that retention is a lot cheaper than acquisition. So if you can find ways to retain your star employees, you need to do that. And if that means giving them the flexibility to take the day off because their healthcare or their childcare didn't show up, or their school went virtual for the day, whatever it may be, you as a leader need to recognize that and embrace it and celebrate it. And you're going to keep that employee. Trust me, you don't want to be looking for new employees right now in this atmosphere, because they're very, very, very hard to find. So grab those that want to work with you, find a way to keep them happy. They deserve it.
Yep. I agree with that statement completely. Because I think, talking to some other business owners throughout this year is, how can we take care of our staff? How can we take care of these employees? I mean, they're and coming from a leadership aspect of like saying, okay, I know this is hard right now, but we're kind of all in this together. So how can you make them feel that they're also a part of the mission of the company, rather than just, not treating them, but, they're just the employee. So I think that's a really good point, Winston. In terms of, social impacts, I know that's the other side of your brain and experience too, Anastasia. We've really, I think, social impact prior to the pandemic, some people understood what it was, but I think now we're really understanding as a nation, like this idea of social impact. And we've seen a lot of different movements this past year, but in particular, just like taking back the curtain of the causes that we really need to focus on within our country and the world. So I was wondering, how has the pandemic kind of affected your work in social impact and philanthropy?
Yeah, for sure. So, I definitely think social impact's been around for a little while. I do think that the past, half dozen or even so less years has really seen the evolution from CSR, which was just effectively cause marketing. Let's throw some dollars at a problem and whitewash, how we're leaning into it as a way to create more headlines for our work. But it wasn't really transformative. I think now, you're seeing, particularly also with the new administration, new regulations, and new state shareholder and social norms are also really becoming a catalyst in terms of how companies are thinking about, we can't just make profits, and we can't just, put together a cause marketing campaign. When we're creating impact, we're measuring it and we're tracking that. It is going to actually affect our bottom line and help us in growing overall. And so I think these trends are definitely here to stay. I certainly think that the pandemic, particularly around the killing of George Floyd and a lot of the social and racial unrest we were seeing, has really been a major catalyst, as we're seeing. It was like a lot of companies were focused on the environmental, climate, some sustainability issues, some, helping communities around them. This has really put the S in ESG front and foremost. And companies are realizing that they need to take social stances, and they need to do more in order to actually create change, which is also going to be beneficial for their own companies later on. But, I think, we even saw at Booz Allen, for example, beyond what we're doing as a company, our employees wanted to take action. And this is not us. This is all over the world that you're seeing this, that, even if you're seeing your paycheck being cut or, certain things untenable, everyone is willing to open up their wallets to give to these causes that they care about, whether it's feeding America and feeding people, whether it's Black Lives Matter and helping to bring about social change, whether it's closing the digital gap with this whole understanding that kids are at home and they can't go to school if they can't connect to school. And so I think that, people have overall, not just companies and private sector, more and more and more, it's just becoming something that's so part of our nature. And I also think it was one of the major silver linings that we saw throughout the pandemic was that humanity really came through. And, we mentioned it with the restaurant industry, restaurants partnering up, trying to help each other however they could. Another great example for us, Fabio Trabucchi, like he launched his online store and started carrying our gelato. So we got to kind of be part of that. But, really just seeing people all over, they can't go out and volunteer. They can't go out we're building together and build houses. But what can you still do from home in terms of virtual volunteering and opening up your wallet?
Um, I think that's a
Yeah,
great
and I
point.
don't
I
know if you
think
have anything else to chime in there too, Winston, 'cause I feel like, yeah.
sure. So I think the key for any organization as they think through this is authenticity. I think you need to, if you're going to sort of enter the social responsibility, you need to do it authentically. Doing the photo op, going down to DC Central Kitchen once for the photo op and trying to spread that out or take on a cause that you don't believe in is not going to work. Diners are savvy these days. As Anastasia said, people, especially the younger generation, they're picking places to work or places to go for dinner or to shop at based on what they're doing, and they'll see right through you if you're doing it just for the bottom line and not the double bottom line. So I think that's really important for leaders to think about. I think as it relates to social impact too, I think what needs to happen in any industry, be it hospitality or any other industry, is not just the hospitality industry, the restaurateurs coming together, but it's those that are surrounding them and supporting them, like the restaurant associations that are in each state. I think they're doing a great job of celebrating the diversity in the industry. And I think that should be recognized. The Restaurant Association here in DC, Kathy Hollinger, her team is doing an incredible job focusing on this kind of stuff. I think it also follows to the media. The media needs to celebrate the diversity, women, underserved communities, Black-owned chefs, Black owners, etc. That needs to be celebrated more. It's not only us wanting to do it. It needs to be really a group effort.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I kind of like something that you just said just now, Winston, was the double bottom line. I mean, at the end of the day, we all do need to, like, at the end of the day, we are making choices. We make choices to leave our home every day. I know we're kind of at the other side or getting to the other side sort of this pandemic, but I think we're a lot more intentional with our buying decisions and also where we want to open our wallets, to Anastasia's point as well. We want to invest in companies, and it's not slapping on CSR anymore. It's here. I think this past year really did unveil a lot of these causes and challenges that our country does have. And it's like, now how can you be more intentional with your donations, or just where you're going to go out at a restaurant or do takeout, right? And I think where it's from the employees of, whether you're having empathy for restaurants, but also having that exchange of respect on both sides, right? Like, we understand where you're coming from, but we also want to have this a great dining experience too. So it's just empathy, I think, on both sides as well, and kind of just appreciating the waiter, appreciating the hostess, appreciating the restaurant owner, whatever that may be, the busboy, whatever that may be, and just really just saying thank you and a smile. But I think that's a really good point that both of you made, and I think what I'm curious, because we get some different. When I was asking this question back probably in the fall, a lot of us in the hospitality industry, and I keep on saying us like I'm in it, but I'm a diner. So I'm like, I feel like I'm a part of the industry, but we
You're an
didn't
honorary
really have an
member.
answer, or some people were really hesitant to talk about the answer, but yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So I think, how we peeled back the curtain, we're dealing with things kind of straight on. What do you think how should we approach, what do you think should the approach be for the recovering in this period? And then what lessons should we take, to handle things differently, going forward as we go into this new normal and adapt to the new normal?
It's a great question because you one has to hope that this is like a once in a gazillion chance that we're going to be faced with a pandemic. So hopefully we don't need to learn lessons that we're going to have to employ later. I mean, some of them are basic, like sneeze guards and and others. I got to say, from a personal level, um, my husband has always been an unbelievable saver as it comes to the business. And I've always been the, why are you saving so much? We should be reinvesting it to grow the business. And once the pandemic hit, he was like, see? So, his saving, helped get us through a lot of the hard times when we were waiting for the PPP loans, and enabled us to help grow the business in areas that we never thought we needed to do, or, similar, like, more digital, and how do we somewhat try to update our website so we can be kind of an online commerce first, even though we're a frozen product, right? So, I guess one of the biggest lessons learned for us was the importance of trying to save, for your business, as much as you can. I think also, it's just a lesson on, for us, our employees are our family. And, he felt the weight of this every night before going to bed and every morning waking up, that just as you fear for your family and their safety, there's always a worry, what if somebody comes into the kitchen and they infect other people, or, what are we going to do and produce, and, all of this stuff. So, it really just gives you a real appreciation for those that work with you, and brings everyone a little bit closer, and, and adaptable. And, I think the adaptability, like, that's sort of ingrained in us now. Any restaurant or food business that has made it through this dark year, has had to try a bunch of new things, some of which have stuck and some of which haven't. But that's another silver lining that I see. We finally revamped our website, and we finally did a whole bunch of things that, and tried a whole bunch of new things, some of which stuck, some of which didn't. But, some of these cool partnerships that came out of, trials and tribulations, we're going forward with again this year. I think the adaptability meant innovation, and so those innovations are certainly there to stay. And you see this throughout the industry. I was on the phone with a friend from LA, and she was telling me some businesses that have popped up even for parties, that you can actually hire a company who will come and, like, put together like a really cool, authentic Moroccan dinner night under the stars on the beach. Of course, in DC, we don't have a beach, but you see these new businesses that have opened. Airbnb's pivoted so much towards their experiences, and all of these other things. And so I think a lot of those are here to stay, and also just teaches us in general that, the resilience means adaptability and, innovation, in essence.
Definitely. I think that's really well stated, Anastasia. Thank you for sharing that. Winston, what did you have to do to what do you have to say to pile onto that response as well?
I think piling on is right, because a lot of what Anastasia said was exactly right. I think what this pandemic showed is that hospitality operators are the ultimate entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and you learn a lot of things being an entrepreneur. You learn how to fail fast, but you also learn how to pivot quickly. And it's been amazing to see these operators do both. In terms of failing fast, you learn from it. And so I think the big lesson was to, how can I take my operation and quickly expand the revenue streams? If you're a sit-down diner, sit-down restaurant, how can you suddenly do takeout or delivery, things you may have never done before. I think, Anastasia, didn't you guys offer delivery now too in a way that I don't think you did before? Maybe you did offer delivery before, I'm not sure. But there's a lot of ways that operators pivoted because of their circumstances. And I think the most important thing that I think the successful operators did is not forget their employees, as we've talked about, but also creating that connection with the diners. And I think that was really important, is to, really personalize a connection with the diners, because, I know as a diner, I'm going to go back to the restaurants that treated this pandemic both seriously, for me, the safety as myself as a diner, as well as their employees, but also one that kept me informed and did some interesting things. And so I think that's really important to recognize, is this has really underscored the importance of creating that personal connection between the restaurant and the diner, be it whether you know their preferences and can cater to them, to that, their experiences, or whether it's saying, hey, you know what, we've decided, even though our particular state has said we can be at 25% capacity, we don't feel safe yet to do that. So we're staying closed. We're going to offer you delivery and create a great experience that way. But we care for your safety and your health and our employees' health. And I think that goes a long way. And trust me, a lot of people remember that.
The last thing I'll add to that, and just back to the lessons learned and trying new things. I think that you'll see that the restaurants that really pull through are the ones that weren't afraid to try new things, whether it was like launching a butcher shop if you're a steakhouse, or launching an online grocery store to keep up with the demand of the Whole Foods deliveries of the world. For us, we're a gelato company. We jumped onto the hot chocolate bomb craze like you didn't even realize, like during the holidays. And we did green tea and white tea and white chocolate, and just so many pies. And we piloted gelato cakes and lots of really cool new products that our clients at home loved. And yes, we were delivering them, which, did become onerous, because some of that stuff you realize, like, is it really worth it to drive out to Alexandria for 4 pints of gelato? Well, I guess when that's like your bottom line, and yeah, you do it. And you do it knowing that hopefully there'll be repeat and hopefully they'll order more. But, I think the biggest lesson learned are the ones that are okay, apt to change and innovate, are the ones that are going to continue to pull through.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, just sometimes, a lot of times, as an entrepreneur, you're like pivoting and you're just like, I don't even know where these ideas are coming from, but like, it's just, you just have to keep it moving. Like, you don't really have the time to like sit in your thoughts. It's like, oh, seeing this, let's go, let's try it. And what's magical about the hospitality industry is, while there'll be ebbs and flows, of course, I mean, and everyone needs hospitality in life. Like, it's just a part of society. And so it's just a matter like of I think the survival of the fittest. Are you willing to, try new things, pivot, kind of think outside the box, or are you going to kind of sit there and kind of wait for the pandemic to be over and, try to keep paying your rent? So I think that's just a really interesting point. And speaking of, innovations, right? And moving to these platforms probably that you never could imagine having to move into, online, all that stuff. And I'm just hoping that those platforms and this is that we can have this magical hybrid model of the in-store, out-of-store experience too, where you can have different streams of revenue. But speaking of tech has really offered new ways for people to connect. What are some of the technological advancements that you think will impact the industry going forward?
I can go if you want.
Winston, did you want to start with this one, since speak some from your experience with OpenTable?
Sure. I think it ultimately comes down to sort of a theory that I've always had, and why I started Venga 10 years ago, and that is expanded even more so now, with the fact that operations have to be more lean and mean, right? As restaurants trying to staff back up, they're probably operating with less people than they were before. And so I think it's all the more important to make sure that all of your different technology and your technology stack speaks to each other, because each of them has really valuable information. But if they're siloed and kept separate, it's inactionable. But if you can bring all those together, it does two things for you. It provides insights to how to run the business better, but also personalize the guest experience. But more importantly, it allows the operator not to sit behind a computer for 6 hours a day looking at spreadsheets and Excels and just trying to figure things out, and spend more time at the counter or at the table, interacting with the diners. And so I've seen a lot of platforms over the last year really recognize that and run towards that, and provide sort of a one-stop shopping for different things, whether it's a bento box, which is a website that has expanded to include things like digital ordering, to new companies out there that are doing subscription services for the restaurant industry. I think there's some really exciting stuff down the pike, but ultimately comes down to saving the operator's time and providing insights into your diners.
I think to jump on there and maybe even to stay in line with your last question around lessons learned and adaptability, I think there has been an explosion of the amount of technologies that are available. And, I'm thinking of everything from like the ordering stuff like Toast to like, we need to get on to GoPuff, and like just making sure, I mean, it is almost overwhelming, right? Because you've got DoorDash, Postmates, GoPuff. And so it's like, how many of these do we need to be on? And are we breaking even? But I think it really was a year of just try everything and just be adaptable and like get onto these technologies and see which ones work and which ones don't. And I think it's another way of, those restaurants who have been agile and adaptable and wanting to kind of try new things and use new technologies. Those are the ones that are going to move into the future. I also think, though, as things do become back to normal, it'll be interesting to see the use case of some of these that continue and some of these that, quite frankly, don't. Partly because not only do a lot of these technologies cost a lot of money, but if you want to have anyone view your product more than other products, like that even costs more money. And so I think now we're really going to see restaurants and everything tightening their belt pretty tightly. And so, it'll be interesting to see what technology they decide to hold on to and what they don't. One thing I think that will be interesting, and Winston, you'll probably know if someone's already developing this, but over the past month, just kind of starting to go out, and I have my vaccines now, so really excited to get back into the dining and experience again. But menus items have literally doubled. And, what started off as, oh yeah, you can get dinner for, really nice dinner, bottle of wine, everything like that for, well under $100, now you're really looking at doubling that. And I understand. And not only that, portions are getting smaller. Everywhere I go, portions seem smaller, yet you're paying twice the price. So I think it will be interesting to see what happens in the world of fine dining as opposed to fast casual, and what people are going to stick with and what they're not. I'd love to have this conversation again in a year and just see if there's, and I guess where I'm going with this, like, is there a technology for the user or for the restaurant industry where they can go in and sort of standardize and see, like, what is everyone charging for a steak now? Are we too high here, or we need to raise the price a little bit more? So
there are some.
That's actually really interesting, Anastasia. I would love to get your thoughts on that, Winston.
Yeah, there are actually some companies out there. I mean, first of all, I think the three of us should start a company to do that, Anastasia, for you. But actually, there are a couple of companies that do it well, that take data from the point of sale, which, as you know, has all the transaction information, and also shares it. They have insights that share sales data in your region, in your state, in the East Coast versus West Coast, all that kind of stuff. So there are some people doing that. I think, which is really valuable now. As you said, as you come back, you need to know what the right pricing strategy is. So happy to talk to you about those after this if you're interested. I think one other last piece of advice that anyone who's in tech right now needs to understand, and I believe strongly, is you need to have an open API. And what that basically means is you need to allow your technology to speak to other softwares in the industry. To Anastasia's point, everyone's trying everything right now, but there's going to be a couple winners that come out of this. And the ones that can speak to, for example, Toast, the one that can speak to Toast because that's the restaurant's POS, and pull data from that and connect data from that is going to win versus the one that is trying to do stuff without that benefit of using other data. Once again, getting a complete picture of your restaurant and having those individually siloed softwares talk to each other, I think is critical. And that means being open about it, not thinking you can do everything for the restaurant.
Definitely agree with that. I see that from the side of just working in from the digital video side of trying to just pull analytics. Like if we could just have a little bit more of an open API, then I think everything would be a little better. So on a personal level, I would just love to kind of wrap up the interview with getting a little more personal around mental health, because I know you guys have been such stewards for helping others this past year. But at the end of the day, when you have to help others, you also have to help yourself. So, what have you each learned going through the past year, and how do you see, those lessons guiding you going forward?
It's been such a tough year for me, but I also know it's been a tough year for everyone. And I think that also coming to a recognition, just recognizing from the beginning, I'm super thankful for things that I have. I'm certainly not suffering from hunger. But it doesn't mean that I don't have the right to also feel sad. It's been a really tough struggle for a lot of people. I think everyone in this time has sort of found what works for them, or at least tried to. And, for me, that has meant just walking and making sure I get my vitamin D time. And, I don't care. I mean, if it's freezing, you won't find me outside, which is why the winter was particularly cold and hard for me. But, just that's my outlet. Love to throw on some music and go for a walk. I live 2 blocks from Rock Creek Park, never stepped foot into Rock Creek Park the 10 years that I've lived here, but now I'm there almost every other day. And so for me, that is like definitely my Zen. That's for sure. I know a lot of people, even my daughter has gotten really into mindfulness and meditation. My mind is just, I feel like, won't shut up for that sort of thing. So that's why I need to like get out and like be active in order to shut my brain down and just, kind of breathe in some fresh air. That's what works for me.
Awesome. Yeah, meditation doesn't always work for everyone, but I think walking, and everyone has their own sense of meditation. How about you, Winston?
Yeah, I mean, to agree with Anastasia, I mean, we were so fortunate this past year, given what so many others were experiencing. And I think part of that was the ability to sort of look at things and look at them from an optimistic perspective. That's one of the things I always try and do, is always look at the bright side. It doesn't always work. But for example, I've got 2 young kids. I got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And this past year, the time I was able to spend with them because of the pandemic was time I'm never going to get back. And it's, everyone tells you the kids grow up in a blink of an eye. Well, I'm so thankful I had that time, and I really focused on taking care of them and spending time with them. During the pandemic, we moved out. We have a ranch in Maryland, northern Maryland, which is a lot of hiking. We've got a creek, we've got a pond, and we've got 9 sheep. So I've become a great sheep herder. It's great for the kids, but it's also great exercise for me because I have to chase those buggers and try and get them to eat. So that's how I found my Zen, was to spend as much time outside as well with my kids.
I love that. I love that. Well, in wrapping up here, we also love to ask our guests, what does mental wellness mean to you?
I think mental wellness is finding balance and being intentional about it. Just doing simple things. If you need an hour for yourself for lunch, just put that time in your calendar and don't let anyone take that away from you. And like, I'm a big believer in like, if you put it in the calendar and schedule it, like it'll stay there and you can abide by it. So that's a huge thing that I live by. I have a crazy sweet tooth. I mean, I married a pastry chef, so I do love a lot of dark chocolate at night and gelato, but during the day, I eat tons of vegetables and fruits. And, I've raised my kids to love all of that stuff. I don't think vegetables need to be bland. I think they can be fun, and you high roast them and just get creative with it. And, obviously this year has meant a lot of cooking and looking up new recipes and reiterating and getting fun with it. And so, when I'm putting good stuff in my body, it helps me to feel better mentally. And I also feel that mental health wise, I've gotten a lot more vulnerable this year. I don't know that a year and a half ago I ever would have come out publicly and told people like, yes, I've been crazy depressed this year. It's been a horrible year for me. Like I never would have said that. And I'm not the kind of person to like go on rants on Facebook and things like that either. But I think it helps to know that people aren't judging you and that you can be open with people and be a little bit vulnerable and get a little uncomfortable. And by being able to take that load off and not feeling fearful that people are going to judge you, it's actually been helpful for my mental health too. And also to know that other people are there to support you and they're maybe going through it too. And again, for my own mental health, and this won't work for everyone, I do think exercise is really important. So if it's taking walks, if it's doing yoga, if it's going for a run, whatever it is, I just think sunshine and fresh air is so important. And like, after a year of, you have like these weeks in February and January where you're like, oh my God, I haven't even left my house this week because it's just too cold and dark and rainy or snowy or whatever it is. And those have been the times that have been the hardest. So those are my tips.
I love that.
And of course, gelato. When you're feeling super, super low, sinking those worries into a pint is always a good idea.
Exactly. I mean, you just got to splurge sometimes. I love it. How about you, Winston?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is being present at whatever you're doing. I think that's, I'm not going to pretend that I'm always present with my kids. I need to be. And I've worked really hard to do that with my wife and with my family to separate that work-life balance. It's been tougher because work and life are in the same house now in a way that they weren't before. And so I think finding that, making sure that you dedicate and you set up a routine. Okay, this is when I'm working. This is when I'm playing. And you don't try and do both at the same time. No one wins when you try and do both at the same time. Most importantly, you kids lose out. So I think that's really important, is being present. I think, secondly, it's not bottling up any emotions or any anxiety or stuff, and being open about it with, at least your wife or your partner or your husband, whoever it may be, and not letting it sort of get to this point where it's going to explode at one point. Because, with everything going on, not just the pandemic, but with Black Lives Matter, the anti-Asian hate that's going on right now, it just takes one thing to really set someone off. And if you're bottling all that up, that's not going to lead to a good outcome. So please make sure you're talking to other people. I think exercise, lastly, is really important as well. Most of my exercise is doing 30-pound curls of my two kids, as I take them up to bed, kind of thing. But getting outside, doing those walks, are really important. So those are sort of the three things that sort of ground me and have kept me grounded.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think exercise has really been I think I'm exercising more than I was prior to the pandemic. And that's just been able to keep my head really clear. And being outside, I don't think we really appreciate the sunlight as much as we can really appreciate now, and the grounding of that. So definitely aligned there. Well, I just wanted to thank you both for joining us today. Really appreciate just being open and vulnerable. I think that's one of the most magical things that have come out of the pandemic is the power of vulnerability. So I just want to give this opportunity to give you any closing words that you wanted to share with the audience before we wrapped up.
I have to say, to echo Winston, a big thank you to Pamela Sorensen for just being that ultimate connector and lifelong friend. I guess in terms of parting words, it's, surround yourself by people that you can trust, that will be there to support you and give you the best advice to help you continue to move forward, and be resilient. I think this year has taught me that I'm more resilient than I thought I ever could be. In the beginning of the year, I was just constantly thinking about like, hey, if Britain can survive the Blitz, we can survive this. And this has been like our Blitz a little bit. And I feel like we've survived it, at least I hope. It just makes you realize that you're much stronger and more capable of being able to overcome a whole lot more, at least I am, than I ever thought I would be. Those are my parting words.
Well, thank you. Those are definitely great parting words.
For me, I think it's recognizing we are entering a new era for America. As cheesy as that sounds, I think a lot of what has happened over this past year has hopefully made people aware of, that there's a world that has changed dramatically for both good and bad. The recognition of other cultures and needing to make sure that we recognize that and support that is really important. But I also think it's just as important to be selfish sometimes. I think for your own mental health, it's okay if you think about yourself. It's okay if you get that alone time for yourself. I think that will make you a better person overall if you just act selfish every now and then. So don't be shy.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. Don't be selfish. I think that's the one thing is that I always go back to where airplanes say, put your mask on first, because, you have to protect your own energy. And so I just want to thank you both, Winston and Anastasia, for joining us today on We Are Everyone. Really, again, appreciate you just taking the time and sharing. I cannot wait to eventually meet you both in person over gelato and good food and experiences. Winston, we'll have to have you come back to the district. I'm sure you love being up there in the country. But yeah, thank you. And we will catch you next time. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.